Welcome, listeners, to the first British eventing show of 2024. The start of the new season is looming. It is going to be upon us very, very quickly, and looking forward to a brilliant year ahead. On this show, we are going to give you a real insight behind the scenes of British eventing, because I'm delighted to say the new CEO of British Eventing, well, she has been the CEO for some 4 or 5 months now, actually. So she is getting herself established in the role, is with us. Rosie Williams, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
It is brilliant to have you with us. We're looking forward to finding out, first of all, a little bit more about you, because we're going to talk about what's coming up in 2024, some of the big changes, the fixtures, everything else that has sort of been worked on by the team over the last few months. But first of all, find out a little bit more about you, because you have extensive experience in governance. You've worked for the Australian Equestrian Federation, the Women's Rugby Football Union in Britain, to name just a few. So first of all, take us right back to your childhood in Australia, because actually horses and ponies and farm life have been a big part of your entire life.
Absolutely. I grew up in country New South Wales on a farm, on a sheep and cattle property, and riding was something that you had to do. We all rode. I have 2 sisters and my dad. My mum never rode, but that's okay. So, yeah, we grew up riding, basically racing around the farm, getting cattle in, getting sheep in, using horses for work. And for our, 90% of our fun as kids too, to race around in the bush and jump logs and things like that. And started riding in pink check troop when I was 4 in the Glen Innes Pony Club, and then went on from there all the way through Pony Club, and was competitive in lots of different ways. Played polocrosse, did show jumping, did lots of different eventing. Everything from troop drill to camp drafting to all that sort of stuff. So horses were a big part of my life.
Sounds like the ideal childhood.
Yeah, because we learnt to ride, and we learnt to be very independent. You had to learn how to get back on without these fancy mounting blocks and stuff. You don't have a mounting block if you're in the middle of nowhere. Opening gates and closing gates on horses, and going fast and chasing cattle around and things like that. You definitely learn how to balance, and you learn how to do things. And my sisters and I used to do a fun thing when we had a big blackberry bush up the top of the hill near the house, and we had a dam down the bottom, and Mum used to send us up to the blackberry bush, and we'd get a bucket load of blackberries, and we'd probably eaten another bucket load, and then we'd come down, we'd race each other down the hill, and we'd put the bucket down, and then we'd go back up to the top of the hill, and then properly race all the way down to the bottom of the hill. And the first one into the water, on your horse, mind you, and you'd go like proper galloping into the dam, and then whoosh, and then we'd be in the water, and we'd be having the swim in the dam. So all great fun.
It's like the dream. The risk assessment now would be terrifying, but actually it's like the dream. So were you ever tempted to pursue horses as a career back then? Because where did sports administration side of things come into life?
It's boarding school, so and it's really interesting. Horses in Australia, yes, I could have camp drafted and I could have done a lot of different stuff, but when you move away from the farm and you start going to school and boarding school, it just becomes impossible to maintain that sort of competitive abilities, plus maintain the horses and stuff when you're away for most of the year at school, and we didn't really have a choice. Boarding school was the only option for us, and don't get me wrong, I loved boarding school. I thought it was brilliant. I got into lots of different sports. I enjoyed the sports side of boarding school way more than I enjoyed the academic side, and then you start to move on. I think if you've not got horses near you all the time and looking after them and doing all that sort of stuff. And competing in Australia is a challenge too, because it's not like we have in the UK where you've got events really close to you. I was selected in the New South Wales polocrosse team, and we had to drive from Glen Innes to Nowra. Now that is on the other side of Sydney, so that's about 15 hours in the truck, and that's close. So that's difficult. And you move on, don't you? So after school, I had a year and a bit off, and I came over here and was nannying and working with Jane Ross now, who was Jane Webber, And so I did a little bit of riding then and mucking around with horses, and then went back to university. And, then you're living in the city, it's as a young person, it's hard to keep up horses and things like that. I always rode when I went back to the farm and rode with my friends and went up to the Snowy Mountains, and, we did all that sort of stuff. But keeping a horse in my lifestyle in Sydney wasn't going to work.
And when you came over and spent some time in England, did you think that actually this was going to be a big part of your career in the future?
I've always loved England. In fact, I think I'm nearly at the point now where I've lived in England longer than I have lived in Australia, which is interesting for someone who's I still see myself as very Australian, but I love England. I love being close to Europe, and I like jumping on the plane and going skiing or doing stuff like that. And I've now got my home here. So home is now the UK, as much as I'm very much Australian.
So take us back to that sort of, I think one of your first biggest roles in governance was for the Australian Equestrian Federation. Is that right?
So what was called, the role was National Sports Manager. So basically I used to look after the disciplines. So there was three different, unlike here, the National Equestrian Federation at the time had all the disciplines sitting underneath it rather than separate. So basically my job was to administer the committees that talked about all the different elements of the three Olympic disciplines. So, we had a chair of dressage, a chair of eventing, and a chair of show jumping, and they all got together. My job was sort of the executive staff support of that, which is great because it got me a really good insight into the FEI and all those sorts of things. And my job was made redundant during a difficult time for the Equestrian Federation, and it was just after the Adelaide Four-Star, the first Adelaide Four-Star, which was the replacement for Gawler. And I was really lucky, actually. I did it was prior, a little bit before the 2000 Olympics, and we did a veterinary conference, an FEI veterinary conference. So we had a lot of Australian vets come in and do all the FEI training in an FEI event situation, so that in the preparation for the Olympics. From there, I moved on into other sports.
And one of those sports that has actually kind of been a huge part of your career is rugby, because you took a role with the Women's Rugby Football Union at a really pivotal time in women's rugby in England, actually, because it feels like, actually, we look at women's rugby, women's football now, and they very much have and they're gaining an even stronger foothold in the market and becoming ever more popular, which is just incredible to see. But actually, the period that you were involved in the Women's Rugby Football Union was probably very early on in the start of that drive of popularity. Is that a fair assessment there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, but my time at women's rugby is of great pride to me, because I know when I see it now, I mean, I still know some of the players that some of the players that are still playing for the England team now started playing when I was there, started their first caps. And we changed the world in terms of the way women in rugby in general was seen, both from I had to work from top down and bottom up. We had to get clubs to want to have women's sections, but we also had to improve the product, which is that, the England team and how good they were. And we had to have a program. And when I started, I think there was about 20 girls who were under 16 playing. And then there's 25,000 women playing rugby in England now. So, we had to do things that, there's some similarities with what I can see with British eventing. We had to do things like set age groups and set age bands, and we had to stick to them so that people could build critical mass around them. And we had to do some quite big policy decisions that just needed to be stuck to allow the sport to grow organically, but also to allow people to really see the value. Because it's, it was always a difficult shout when you went to a rugby club and the grumpy old chairman said, well, I'm not going to pay for the girls to have a set of shirts and things like that. Why should I? So, well, because they're the ones that are in the bar drinking beer, and the boys are, they're contributing to your club. They're the people that are over there cooking the barbecue now and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I was very lucky in my rugby career in Australia, where we were a fully integrated team. The women's team were, part of the club. We worked hard to become part of the club, and that's what I tried to bring over here. And then the other thing was the performance element. We had to move the way that women played rugby on. And not try and repeat the way that men play, just having women play a men's game. I don't know if you're a rugby fan, but if you watch the women now, they can all pass 15 metres off both hands, they can kick, they can do all that sort of stuff. And to make that fundamental change to the product on the England field, you have to start when they're young. Your quality coaching has to be in place, your profiling, your selection criteria, your policies, your programs, all your support stuff has to start when a player is, 10, 11, 12, 13. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of women's rugby. I mean, I think one of my proudest moments was when I walked out of the Twickenham, the offices, and we just moved the sponsorship arrangement for the kit to Nike. And that was just to get a photo of a male player and a female player in the same photo, we had to obviously move the gear across so that they was wearing the same gear. And there's a photo of Catherine Spencer, and I can't remember who the men's captain was at the time. There's like this massive photo in the shop window. And I just stood there and went, ha, we're getting there. That was a real indicator to me that things had really moved on. And from there, we sold out Women's Rugby World Cup, biggest crowd, made money out of Women's Rugby World Cup. And then from there, it's just grown and grown from, World Rugby now are investing massive amounts in it. The RFU are investing massive amounts in it. And it started to pay back. 65,000 people watching rugby at Twickenham, women's standalone game. So there's a lot of similarities.
It's amazing. The parallels between rugby and eventing is huge anyway. And I think one thing that we take for granted in eventing, but actually just listening to you talk about rugby there and women sort of kind of fighting for their place, is men and women in eventing compete equally. And that is not normal. And yet for us, it is.
Absolutely. And it's one thing that I don't think we do enough with. That we have even our population of the female versus male breakdown of our membership is significantly female. Eventing and equestrian sport in general is providing a participation opportunity for women to be active. And I think not sure we're doing enough with that yet. And we don't celebrate that enough. So that's something that I'll do. I mean, you've only got to look at the European team from this year where there's 4 women, which is just brilliant. But it means that we should be taking advantage of that, not just necessarily changing things.
You kind of touched upon the importance of policy and strategy, that actually strong foundations of that, and actually sticking to those strong foundations, they take a while to come into effect. How important is that mindset in actually bringing that into eventing, and that some of the changes that you're making now, very much, yes, you want them to have a short-term effect, but actually this is the long-term game as well?
Look, I think it's very easy in a sport to flip between what's popular. And it's very easy in sport in general to take the loudest voices and make change around the loudest voices. And that, to me, is very dangerous. We have to be working on things like viability for our organisers. So how we do that and work with organisers is really key. But we have to sort of let things come to their course. It's a bit like, the abandonment fund, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But, we need to stick to the abandonment fund, and we need to keep trying it until it really proves that it hasn't. I think it'll work, and I'm very confident that if we don't have such a good year in the first year, we have to go again, because I think just trying one thing for a year, it doesn't give it time to bed in, doesn't give membership a chance to really get to know it, doesn't give it enough time across different time frames and weathers and patterns and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's really key. And changing the rules and changing things all the time I think just leads to confusion. And I think what we've got to be very conscious of, and we're going to be doing a review of the rule book because it's very complicated. And I've read it. The girls in the office gave me a copy, and I actually read it over a couple of glasses of wine, mind you. And I had to prove to them that I'd read it, but I had all these notes on it. And I think what's happened what happens in a lot of sports is we put new rules in, but we don't take any rules out. So the confusion grows. I think we've got to look at our rules, and we've got to go, okay, well, at no point am I saying that we shouldn't be looking at absolutely the tradition. The tradition of the big events and the hot tails and the big cross-country courses and all that stuff and beautiful houses, Absolutely. But do we, when we in a Go BE class, do we really care that somebody has pink jodhpurs on? If that's the only pair of jodhpurs they have, are we going to say, no, you've got to go and buy a new pair of white jodhpurs or fawn jodhpurs before you're allowed to come and compete in our event? Now, no, we can't do that. I mean, you've only got to look at things, the success of things like parkrun. I mean, parkrun is it's all just about flexibility. It's about giving people the chance to come along and enjoy the sport at whatever level they are wanting to do it at. Obviously with eventing, we've got different safety. We've got a certain set of safety stuff that we have to do, but do we really care at that lower level what people wear? Obviously that might not go down very well with some of the traditionalists, but obviously when you get, up a bit further and things, then we set into the rules as they are, but we have to be more inclusive. And by inclusive, I do mean gender and ethnicity and religion and all those sorts of inclusivities, but we've got to make eventing a sport that people want to come along and do on a regular basis.
Take me back, because you make some really, really key points there in terms of your vision for British eventing. But take me back to actually taking this role and what your kind of overriding vision is for British eventing.
My overriding vision is eventing for all where they want it, when they want it. So in the format that they want it. So, and that sounds pretty trite, I'm sure, but that's exactly what we mean. So I live in Surrey. Now, my closest eventing course might be, 10 miles away, whatever. And I want to make sure that I can go there regularly and I can do the 3 phases. But I also need to know that I can do it on whether it's my 3-star horse that I bought for hundreds of thousands of pounds, or I can go trip-trotting around on my cob. It's about allowing people to compete in those 3 phases on the same day in the right place at the right time. Now, obviously we've got a standard, and this I think is a really important issue. We have a set of standards for a reason. And the reason that sort of gold standard of eventing is because of the safety elements. And, we can't hide away from the fact that people fall off horses. And, the unregulated market is currently challenging our core business. Now, if that we need to embrace and work with people, but we need to try and move towards getting the unaffiliated, unregulated, whatever you want to call it, back into the fold so that we can really be sure that when I turn up to an eventing to go and do the 3 phases, I am covered by the right insurance. There is a doctor on site. There is that flexibility that I want to be able to compete in and all that sort of stuff. So there's a big piece of work to do. And I think I said it at the AGM about looking at where BE sits and where the currently unaffiliated market sits. And, the other thing that we have to address is cost and perceived cost. It was really interesting. I had I was at Littleton Manor. I think I've got their name right. And this lady trotted up to me and she said, she was lovely. She said to me, "You're the new CEO." And I thought, oh, no, here we go. And she said to me, "I'd just like to tell you." And I said, "What was that?" Thinking, here we go again. She said, "I'd just like to tell you that my BE membership cost me half of what my numnard cost me." And I went, oh, it's a really good sort of comparison. And the guy that was standing with me, she trotted off. I said, "Oh, thank you for that. So it's lovely." And she trotted off, and she had like a very expensive saddle on, and
very expensive numna.
It was one of those Equitex, I think they're called, Equitex or whatever. And yeah, they're really expensive. And but it put it into context for me that actually your horse, your truck, your numna, your saddle, your gear, that's nothing. I can't do anything about that bit because that's your choice. That's your consumer choice. Your choice to compete and be a member of BE is one of those costs, but it's not anywhere near the total cost. And I thought that was just really interesting because she was lovely.
To be fair, you put it into context and you start to break down a set of shoes or, like you say, some equipment and things like that. And the money, you can add it up in other areas very, very quickly. You just touched upon there, that sort of moment when she said, "Are you the new CEO of British Eventing?" And it is absolutely no secret there have been challenges over the past few years. It has not been a straightforward role to step into. What was it that actually made you think, no, do you know what? I do want to take on this challenge.
I've applied for the job twice and didn't get it both times. But then, it is the challenge. It's the lots of puzzles. It's lots of different bits. It's the bit where, I mean, I've always said to myself, I won't work in a sport that I don't like watching. So obviously I love rugby, so I love watching rugby. I like it. I love eventing, so I'm really happy to sit and watch it and talk to people while I'm watching it, which is really key. It's the types of people too, I think, that, the horsey people, farming people, sort of similar types of people, and it's the complexity of the organisation. That's the challenge of it, and it's a good thing to bring your skills and really test your skills, because, this isn't an easy job at all. There's a lot of plates spinning in the air, but I decided that this was a good thing. And then the other thing, that I met the board, and Mark and the board have been fantastic. They are a truly professional board of people. And as a CEO of a sport, it's really tough if you have a very hands-on executive board who want to get involved in the detail all the time, and that's tough. But these guys don't. They've done a brilliant job in the interim to steady the ship, but they're very supportive. They're on the end of the phone, and I can pick up the phone and if I need a particular piece of advice, I can go to Sandeep, who's a governance expert. I can go to Will, who's a lawyer. I can go to all those different people, but they don't all pile in and give me their opinions all the time. And that's really valuable.
We kind of touched upon it a little bit earlier on, and British eventing has a really unique balance of being a successful, viable, commercial enterprise, but also the foundation for grassroots sports. And those two things sometimes are quite far apart from each other. How do you strike that balance and actually get that balance right?
I think one of the things that has surprised me about eventing in Britain is the amount of people who make their living out of it. And that might seem a bit naive, but there is a lot of people who, whether they coach eventing, whether they buy and sell horses, whether they are actually competing, whether they run yards that people, livery yards that they have their eventing horses on, et cetera, and, the list goes on. And then you've got your organisers who have their businesses modelled around hosting our events. It's really challenging to be able to have it's challenging to be able to find the role of what the national governing body is responsible for, and also have enough cash in the bank to continue to do the foundation work that's required and regulate what goes on. Because it doesn't matter which way you turn, you tend to run into people who have got, in the nicest possible way, a conflict. They are emailing you with a complaint because, I don't know, if it's a rule change or abandonment fund or whatever it is affecting their business. And it's their business that is threatened by any of that change. So that's really tough to be able to do that. We have to be more commercial. British eventing needs to bring more commercial revenue into the organisation to top up what we get from our membership to maintain the quality service that we need to maintain. And it's a never-ending circle and cycle a little bit, because, it's, if you don't have enough money in, you can't give the service, and if you can't give the service, you lose your members, and around you go. So that's the biggest thing. But you've also got to make sure that you keep your crown jewels, that we've got to be very sensible and smart about things like our rights. Who owns the rights to our commercial rights? Where are our streaming rights, television rights, broadcast rights, sponsorship rights, things like that? And that, in having to focus on that, it takes you away a lot from the grassroots bit, which is good quality events locally for somebody that actually there's only 50 people at. And that's the real balance. But the business model that British eventing currently has, and I think it's different to what it used to be, is very much around the mass membership is what we need to, revenue is what we need to continue to maintain the service that we provide. And we've got to be better at giving and helping people understand the value of the membership. And I think that's really important.
You've been in the role 4 or 5 months now. Have there been any surprises?
Yeah, the one about how many people earn money out of BE and two out of this sport, I think was a surprise. I was very well briefed by the board before taking the role, so there's not a massive amount of surprises. I'm surprised in some parts about any accepted behaviour and things like that, but they're things that we can change pretty quickly. And you can't be surprised when you come into an organisation that has had financial difficulties because cuts have had to be made. So, and as soon as you cut things, then you think, oh, hang on, why don't we have somebody doing that job? And you go, oh, okay, because we couldn't afford it. So there's not that many surprises in that sense. It's pretty well briefed, I keep uncovering stuff, which I go, oh, hang on, why haven't we done something about that? But that's not a surprise. That's just what happens when a new CEO comes into a business like this and wants to do things differently, and the business has been under pressure and things have been let go.
What has been going on then over the last few months? Because obviously there's a huge amount to get your head around. I always think that actually, yes, the season is really busy and you get to the end of the season and everybody kind of takes a big deep breath. But actually, it's those sort of 4 or 5 months from November to February that so much work is being done behind the scenes to kind of get the sport ready for the next year. So I'm going to start with, first of all, the abandonment fund. Abandonment insurance has been a topic of hot conversation over the last couple of years in particular, and it wasn't helped at all this last year by probably one of the wettest years that we've had, certainly as far as I can remember. So what changes have been made there, and what do you hope will be the outcome of that for next year and beyond?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because you're so busy in the off season. We're way busy. I'll share a couple of other things with you in a minute. But so the abandonment fund. Look, I went to the insurers. People had been having the conversations about abandonment insurance before I started. And I came in and I thought, okay, well, we need to have a good look at the insurance market first, like the toll market. So we talked to KBIS and Shearwater and Howdens and whatever, all those different organisations. And despite the brokers' hard work, it got to a point where the premium was just what I thought was extreme. And that's because it's not anybody's fault. That's just because the insurance market is where it is at the moment, and we've had all the things, the pandemic and all those sorts of things that have gone wrong in the global financial situation. So at that point we thought, I just can't stomach over £1 million a year consistently for life, basically, having to be paid to insurers to fund the return of entry fees. I'm thinking there must be a different way around this. So we modelled with a company called Portis. We got them to do a piece of work with us because with this sort of modelling, you need really good information and data and very clear, very brainy people to model things, and actuaries and stuff like that to make sure that you don't miss anything. So we went, okay, well, let's have a look at this. So we, and obviously there had been an abandonment fund before. It didn't have a cap on it, which I thought was really interesting. So we modelled, Debbie Pritchard and I modelled with, and we worked really tightly with Laura and Rachel, who are the two leads now on the organisers committee, and a small group of stakeholders, to just keep talking about the numbers, because the insurance number was going to be unpalatable. It didn't matter what happened. A 20% increase in fees to cover the insurance premium was never going to land. But I'm really glad we did that piece of work, because we now know that until the insurance market changes, it's not insurable, if that makes sense, in inverted commas. I mean, you can insure it, but the cost of insurance is probably way too high. So we thought, okay, well, let's have a look at abandonment fund. And we thought, well, okay, well, everybody's going to have to put into it, and because it needs to be fair and it needs to be equitable, in the sense that who gets what out of it is really important. So we had sitting on our balance sheet leftover funds from the previous one. So we've put in $75,000 to start it off, and then we're asking all entrants to put in 5%, and the organisers who don't have insurance at this year to put in 2%, and then those that do have insurance, this is where it's got quite complicated, because we've got some that haven't been able to get insurance and others that haven't. Some of them haven't wanted to, needed to, or are unable to get insurance. And then the other ones have got it at varying different costs. So we thought we needed to be pretty fair about it. So organisers with no insurance will put in 2%. Organisers with insurance won't contribute to the pot this year because they're already paying the premium, but everybody's required to get a 60% refund back out. So the risk on this, and I've been very clear on this, is that we have a disastrous first few months and the pot gets emptied. Now, unfortunately, I can't control the weather. If I could, that would be great. But we just have to let it play out a little bit. It goes back to our policy discussion before. We've got to say, okay, but, we may get to the point if we have 2, 3, 4 sunny years that we have quite a significant pot in there and we say, okay, we don't need any more money in the abandonment pot this year. We're going to not charge for abandonment, the abandonment pot, or, that's what I'm trying to get to. We want to build up the pot so that we can say in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, actually, we've got £1 million. We don't think we need any more. We're not going to charge anybody this year. So you have a rest year or whatever you want to call it. And it really puts us in control of what we can do rather than continuing to pay out to an insurance company or brokers or whatever that it is just money out the door, really. Now, I could be found very wrong on that, but I'm not afraid to try it. And I think, we now have got to a number too that is a little bit more palatable for everybody. And I'm hoping it doesn't cause people to think, actually, the eventing is now way too expensive for me. But I think it's a good thing. As long as everybody sort of takes it in the way it's meant to be, it's meant to help, not hinder, and it's meant to be fair, not be inequitable.
It will also be controlled by a technical advisor at an event who works for British Eventing. So things will be a lot quicker than going through an insurance process.
Absolutely. So once the TA, in conjunction with the organisers and stuff, but, the TA is the person on the ground that will be making the decision. And once they make that decision, then it's abandoned. Then because BE will be holding the money, we don't have to. The decision is abandonment. It's not about the scale of abandonment or not. So you don't have to wait for insurers to come back and don't have to provide photos and all those sorts of things, which a lot of the guys have had to do this year with their insurance. Then hopefully we'll be trying really hard to get the money back out to the entrance within 14 days. So. That's an advantage because you get your money back quicker.
The relationship with organisers is also something that actually British Eventing have been working on a lot over the last few months, isn't it?
And I've been talking to the organisers a lot, and they're absolutely vital to our business. And it's vital for them to have viable events. I think and it goes back a little bit to some of the stuff that you and I were talking about before about reality. So we've got to talk real. There is a lot of talk about, increased costs and increased things, increased responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. And also there's a lot of talk about the BE costs, and we have to be very clear about what those actually are. But the organisers are a very positive group. I've got a great relationship with Rachel and with Laura, and we're now working together to, I like to talk to them regularly, and they're great because they're good confidential sounding boards. So I can go, hey, what am I going to do with this? And they go, Rosie, don't do that. That's ridiculous. Or they go, oh no, hang on, that was tried by so-and-so, or watch out, this might happen and X and Y might happen. So they've been really, really helpful because I don't want to trip over myself and get it wrong, but I also need to make sure that I'm relatively bold and am able to make clear decisions that I've talked to somebody else about at the front-facing end.
Okay, what else has been going on? The fixtures calendar, quite possibly one of the biggest puzzle pieces that you can pull together, was released just before Christmas. What can you tell us about that?
I tell you what, I'm amazed. Talk about surprises. I'm amazed how complicated it is. It's great. Look, we've got so far it went out just before Christmas. We were really pleased. There was a lot of different moving parts to that, and the abandonment fund was one of them. We some of our organisers couldn't commit to being in the calendar if we didn't have the abandonment fund, and if we didn't have the abandonment fund, we weren't going to have a calendar. So we go around circles a little bit. Adrian and Debbie and the fixtures committee do a great job of trying to balance who wants to go where, who can go where the weather is the worst at the beginning of the year, etc., etc. So I'm really pleased with the calendar. We've had, and I think we need to get used to this. We've had some organisers that, for varying different reasons, so Horse Heath and Richmond, Spetley, Summerford, for varying different reasons, they can't run their events this year. Now, that's not a BE issue. That's a varying different reasons issues for those. But we've got some new ones in the calendar, which is great. We've got 2 new fixtures in Scotland, which is something that came up in the survey that I did earlier on when I started, that they needed more events in Scotland. So we've got 2 more up there. We've got a couple of new organisations coming back. Western Park's back, which is great. The complication with Badminton and Burleigh moving their dates has really made a little bit of a mess at that end of the calendar, so we had to sort of come back round and work on that with the organisers. And I'm really pleased. We've got 11 events that are advanced. We've got 106 Go BE cross-country days, which is great. That's community sport for me. We've got all the regional championships and events, and we've got pony classes and all sorts of stuff. So there's a real mix of events that people can go in. There's a real mix of types of events as well, from those that are based in an equestrian centre like Aston the Walls, etc., all the way to Frickley Park and Osberton and places like that, big houses and all those sorts of things, which is really key. And I'm pleased where we've got to. It's a real challenge to get the calendar worked out, and allow the aspirational people to get their MERs in the right order so that they're qualifying their horses and all that sort of stuff. I don't want to do the job that Adrian and Debs do, and just putting all those puzzle bits together. But I'm pleased with where it is.
There are so many different things to consider with that calendar than most people realise. And it's, like you say, the MERs, it's the weather at that time of year, it's the type of going that they have. It is just unbelievably complicated. One more thing, the youth programme is something that we've actually also seen a huge amount of changes with, recently announced. Tell us a bit more about those.
So principally, youth is the future for me. The National Youth Forum, we have some excellent candidates for that. In fact, it's going to be a really, really tough job to select the young people who are going to be involved in that. We've done some really good recruitment for new coaches for the programs, and we've got Daryl Scaife, who's going to be heading up the program. So Daryl's job is going to be making sure internally and externally that the youth program joins up from bottom to top and top to bottom. The other thing that we'll be doing early this year coming is we'll be doing a complete youth review. So we've got expressions of interest out that will be closing pretty soon, that is asking people to come and join a review panel. We'll be talking to the youth forum, one, but we also want to talk to people, owners, riders, parents, coaches, etc., to really have a deep dive look into the provision that we provide for our young athletes, but not only for those that are going up the aspirational pathway, but actually how do we keep, if you choose or you don't have the horsepower underneath you, or you're just not good enough, or you actually don't want to, you just want to poodle about, which is great, how do we keep you in the sport? How do we get more young people officiating? How do we get more young people choosing to coach if they don't necessarily want to be a full-time rider? And how do we get them to, unlike me, for example, what we talked about earlier, unlike me, when you go to boarding school or you go to school, you stop riding pretty well. And it's a big thing to come back into riding. So how can we keep people involved all the way along their journey?
I think that's a really important point, actually. Making it a really nice environment to be in is the other thing. And I guess ultimately protecting and building that community spirit that eventing is just so well known for.
Look, I think there is problems in all sports with behaviour and parental behaviour particularly, because, people are quite wedded to their children's aspiration, and that's fine, but it won't be tolerated that people make the environment for the majority poor because of somebody's aspiration for their child. I mean, that just can't happen. So we're going to be working with people about behaviour and things like that all the way through the year, and we also want the young people that are involved in the youth program to end up as part of the youth program improving their overall resilience, their overall, that they can take into the rest of their life, their overall ability to work hard and, work ethic and training hard and all that sort of stuff. And that doesn't just, the good stuff that we can bring in, and that doesn't just mean you're going to be a good event rider. It means that if you go to university and you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be an excellent teacher. That sort of stuff. If you're a plumber, you're going to be an excellent plumber because you've got that good work ethic. That working hard and horses and hopefully eventing, they go together.
Good life skills. Yeah, very good life skills to have. Last question for you is priorities for 2024. Obviously, you're sort of coming into a fresh year. We've got the whole season spread out in front of us. What's key?
Developing our use of data and making good data-driven decisions is really, really key. We've got to move away from anecdotes. We've got to work with the organisers to help them deliver viable events. Engage with our membership and our riders to help them understand the value of BE's membership, and by talking to individuals and really getting to the bottom of that part, and ensuring that eventing in Britain is regulated and managed to provide, the safest environment for our members to compete in. And I think that's probably the key one, because safety is absolutely key for everyone. So, it's about putting in place the good foundations and not being afraid to be innovative.
Sort of hit very, very important points. And listeners, I'm sure you guys are getting excited for the start of the new season as we are. There is lots to look forward to. There's going to be some changes. There's going to be some different ways of looking at it, but hopefully we are going to enjoy a drier 2024. As we've all said, none of us can control it. If we could have 500 horses and be absolutely delighted with life all the time. Rosie, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show. I think we're going to get you back a bit more over the next few months as well to get some more real insight behind the scenes of BE. So thank you very much. And wishing you all the best.
Thank you. See you later.